My name is Tom Wiseman III, and I'm here in the federal courthouse in Nashville, Tennessee. It's August 27, 2010, and I have the privilege of interviewing my father, Tom Wiseman, Jr. This interview is taking place as a part of the Legal History Project of the Fellows of the Tennessee Bar Foundation. I am called upon to have a formality here. State your full name, please.
Thomas Anderton Wiseman, Jr.
And when were you born?
November the 3rd, 1930.
Where were you born?
Tullahoma, Tennessee.
Now, I want to first talk about your mother and father and growing up some in Tullahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Your father's name was?
Thomas Anderton Wiseman.
And how did he get his name?
Well, he was named for the doctor in Franklin County that came out into the country and delivered him, Dr. Tom Anderton.
His parents named him after the doctor who delivered him.
Right, right.
And where was he born?
He was born in, in the country in Franklin County.
Marble Plains, is that?
Well, he was born at Marble Hill.
Marble Hill.
And they later had a farm at Marble Plains.
And your mother's name?
Vera Salita Poe Wiseman Simmons. She married after Dad died, remarried.
And we called her Mama. Where was Mama from?
She was from in Franklin County also. Just lived on the creek down there.
How did they?
Little Harrican Creek.
And was that near Awalt?
Yeah.
So people who are familiar with Timms Ford Lake would be able to find Awalt how?
No, because it's 60 feet underwater.
But there is an Awalt Bridge.
Yeah, and it's part of Timms Ford Lake.
Now, how did they move from Franklin County to Tullahoma? And tell us, where is Tullahoma?
Tullahoma is southeast of Nashville, about halfway between Nashville and Chattanooga.
It's in Coffee County.
In Coffee County.
But it's not the county seat.
No, Manchester's the county seat.
Well, how did Mama and Papa move from Franklin County to Tullahoma? What took them to Tullahoma?
Well, my dad was a traveling salesman about that time, and they still lived in Awalt. As a matter of fact, one of the funny stories is that he bought a Model T and taught Mama how to drive when she took him from Awalt to Deckard to catch the train. That's the first time she'd ever driven. She drove back home by herself.
What was he selling at that time?
He was working for Tennessee Biscuit Company, and that was crackers and a bunch of other things.
Now, Papa had a lot of different jobs. He did lots of different kinds of work. Tell us some of the things that Papa did for a living.
Well, he started out, he borrowed $500 and opened a little grocery store in Tullahoma. And operated that and went into the wholesale grocery business. He wound up, he got a Ford dealership in 1939.
What kind of Fords did he sell?
Ford automobiles. And after the war was over, when the war came on, he had about 18 cars in his inventory at that time. He converted them into taxis, and he ran the United Cab Company during World War II because Camp Forest, located at Tullahoma. We were a little town of 4,500 people, and all of a sudden 100,000 soldiers were stationed 2 miles away, and all of their camp followers and everything else, moved into our little town, and I got a liberal education very fast. I was 11 years old.
and tell us about that liberal education. You have 100,000 soldiers moving in, and was that called Camp Forest?
Camp Forest, yeah.
Tell us the kinds of things you did to help Papa with his business, and tell us about that liberal education.
Well, first place is you became aware of things like the bootleggers would back into a angle parking place, back into it so they could open their trunk and sell you a pint and close the trunk. And there were a lot of ladies hanging around the lamp posts. It was unusual.
That was
time.
a big change for Tullahoma.
Oh my goodness! And then it was a good time to make money too. I sold papers out on the camp. I had a block. I got 100 Tennesseans in the morning for 2.5 cents a piece, and I got 100 banners in the afternoon for 2.5 cents a piece, and sold them for a nickel plus tip.
Did you also drive the cab?
I also had a little shoe on payday weekends. I had a shoe shine stand right outside the town pump, which was the biggest beer joint in town.
And you do that on the weekends?
Yeah, well, on payday weekend primarily.
Did you drive any of the cabs for Papa?
Of course, I was underage, but I would take maids home sometimes.
And make money doing that?
Well, I was just doing it for Dad
For the cab business?
For the cab business, right. You know, people would call and want you to come pick up their maid and take them home, and I could do that. You know.
Now, your father also was a tinkerer, kind of an inventor, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, he invented the save-a-disc was one thing that you pulled behind a tractor and disc at the same time you were plowing. It didn't sell, but he made it and got the patent. He had a patent on a line wire fastener because he did some work with a private telephone company before he and Mother married. He had a teaching certificate that he got when he was 18. He had a patent when he was 18. He was an interesting fellow.
Now, Mama worked a lot of her life.
First liberated woman I ever knew. Boy, she hated housework. And she always had help to take care of the four of us. And then she also rented some rooms. You know, we had a great big house that burned in 1937, 38.
Your house that you grew up in burned to the ground.
Yeah.
Now, tell us about Mama, though. You said she was the first liberated woman. Describe that to us. Why do you say that about her?
Well, she went to work with my dad every day that the sun rose, and she counted the money and took care of the books. And she was a smart woman, but she was also very, very attentive to business and was a businesswoman. She was good. She later got a real estate license, and sold real estate and insurance. She got an insurance license.
You have 3 sisters.
I do.
And you're the third of 4?
Yes. My oldest sister died not too long ago.
And her name was?
Salida.
And then you had Catherine as the next sister. And then you have a younger sister named Vera Poe.
Correct.
Where do the Wisemans come from? Give us just a brief, where do they come from? How did they get to Tennessee?
Well, the first Wisemans came from East Tennessee, down the Tennessee River and up the Elk River to settle in Franklin County about the time we became a state. Before that, the first Wiseman stowed away on a boat and was found and sold into an apprenticeship to a carpenter for 7 years to pay for his passage.
And where did he first locate when he came?
Well, he started out in Virginia and then came to East Tennessee, Western North Carolina actually, and then some of his boys came across the mountains to East Tennessee.
Now, tell us about Tullahoma growing up. You've told us about the times during World War II when Camp Forrest was there. Describe growing up in Tullahoma for us.
No, it was a great town and a great place to live. I was unaware of any class distinctions. It's interesting that Tullahoma was almost a classless society. You know, everybody was just who they were.
What about the environment between the different racial groups in Tullahoma?
We had about a 10% black population, and of course we had Jim Crow, like the rest of the South did, I guess. But we made the transition very easily and smoothly when it happened.
I think I'll ask you about that later, because I think that's a good story to tell about Tullahoma. You went through Tullahoma Public School System, graduated from Tullahoma High School.
Yes.
What year?
1948.
And how many people graduated in your class?
48.
And sports, what did you do?
I played football and basketball. You had to. We only had 100 boys in the school, and if you didn't play, you were ostracized. The girls didn't pay attention to you.
Now, neither Mama nor Papa went to college, is that right?
That's correct.
So you're first-generation college graduate,
correct,
along with your three sisters.
Yes.
They went to the University of Tennessee.
All three of them did.
You went to Vanderbilt.
Yes.
How is it that you went
The youngest,
to
Vera Poe, finished at Peabody. But how did I get to Vanderbilt? At that time, my father had a business in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, as well as his business in Tullahoma. And he was driving back and forth to Hopkinsville at least once a week. And he suggested to me, he says, why don't you go to Vanderbilt? I can pick up your laundry and see you. And so that's what I did.
How much did it cost to go to Vanderbilt back in those days?
The tuition was $175 a quarter in the undergraduate school, and then in the law school it was $200 a semester.
Tell us about the Vanderbilt undergraduate experience. Did you have a good time in college?
Oh, I had too good a time in college.
What did you study, and tell us about some of the social activities that you did when you were in college.
Well, tell you my plans first and how I wound up doing what I did. Started out thinking that I was going to go in business with my father when I got out of college. So Vanderbilt had a program at that time called Senior in Absentia, and your first year of law school or other schools could count as elective hours towards your undergraduate degree. So you could finish your 4-year undergraduate degree while getting a year in law school. And I did that. And while I was in law school, his business took some turns for the worse and wasn't too attractive for me to go into. And I liked law school, so it was just kind of serendipitous. I stayed in law school.
Before we go to the law school years, though, tell me about the people that you went to school with. You were a Sigma Chi.
Right.
And there's quite a few people that people who are listening to this might be interested to know were in that same generation that you were, who was Sigma Chi's at Vanderbilt. Tell us some of the people that were fraternity brothers of yours during that time at Vanderbilt as an undergraduate.
Wilbur Creighton, Wilbur Foster Creighton of the construction company, Lester Smith, Smith, Seckman, Reed, Bobby Sanders was a close friend of mine. He was a doctor, a pediatrician, and Lester Freeman went on to be head of the Miami Chamber of Commerce and vice president of a bank in Miami. That's tough. That's a hard one to.
Yeah, well, let me ask this. What about Vanderbilt and coming from Tullahoma to go to Vanderbilt? How did Vanderbilt feel as a place to go?
It was a whole lot further away than the 75 miles, 70 miles between the two towns. You know, it was a big jump for. I suppose I'd been a fairly good-sized fish in a small pond, and all of a sudden I was a minnow in a big pond.
What did you study there during undergraduate?
Business administration.
The times you did study.
Business administration and economics.
Where were some of the places that y'all would go to have a good time? Like, for example, tell us about the Noel Hotel and things y'all do, where y'all go and hang out.
Now, Tom, you're moving into a different era.
I am? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, most of the hanging out that was done then was either at Butch's, the restaurant, beer joint, whatever, down on the corner, Ireland's, and the fraternity houses. Now, all that other came later.
All right. Why did you choose to go to law school? You mentioned wanting to go into business with your father. Why was law school something that you decided to do?
Well, I thought that 1 year of law, somehow or another, I got the impression that 1 year of law would help me in my business career.
So your plan wasn't necessarily to finish law school?
No, it was not to finish. It was just to go that 1 year.
How many lawyers were there in Tullahoma at that time, if you know?
Half a dozen.
Not being the county seat in Coffee County, did you even know any lawyers as a young man? You did?
Yeah, I knew Maynard Tips and Roy Mitchell. And then later on, Jim Henry and John McCord came to Tullahoma, but that was after 1951.
So what year did you first start at law school, which would be your senior year in college?
The fall of 51. And I finished in no, that's wrong. Yeah, started fall of 51, finished in the spring of 54.
And tell us about your law school experience and some of the professors that you had that you still remember fondly and that were an influence on you.
We had a really good faculty. Dean John Wade was just an outstanding dean and teacher. Bill Warren taught criminal law and went on to become dean in another law school I've forgotten now, UCLA. Dean Forrester left here and went to Tulane to become dean of Tulane Law School. We had a good faculty.
Was I may be wrong about this? Was Professor Morgan? Was he there?
Oh, Edmond Marsh Morgan.
Tell us about him.
Yeah, he was something else. They made him retire at Harvard Law School when he turned 65, and he was really at the top of his game. And he came to Vanderbilt. And
his game or his specialty was evidence. Wasn't
evidence, right? He
kind of wrote the book on evidence, didn't he?
Well, he wrote
a book.
He wrote some books. He was recognized as one of the outstanding authorities. He wrote the evidence portion of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. That may be what you're thinking about.
How is it that he came from Harvard to Vanderbilt? Do you know?
I don't know how they got him. I don't know who got him, but he came as soon as he left Harvard and stayed till he died.
And when did you graduate from Vanderbilt School of
1954.
Law? And what did you do after that?
Well, I walked around Tullahoma waiting to go into the service. I had been deferred during school, and it was still subject to the draft, and it was the tail end of the Korean War, and so I knew I was going to have to do it eventually. So I volunteered for induction as an enlisted man. I had passed the bar, but if I'd gone into the JAG Corps, I would have had to stay 3 years, and I could volunteer for induction and get out in 2 years, and I wanted to get on with my life, so I went in as an enlisted man.
Did you have to take a bar exam back then?
Oh, yeah.
Did you take the bar and become licensed before you went into the Army?
Yes.
And is that the branch of service you went into, the Army?
Yes.
What did you do while you were an enlisted man in the Army?
Well, they first sent me to, after basic training, I went to clerk school. And I had been a good typist since high school. And So I was made a company clerk, and then that was in the 3rd Armored Division, and the 3rd Armored Division was gyroed to Germany, and I was too short to go with them, so I had to find a job. So I went with, I applied for some schools and went to the Armored School in Fort Knox, Kentucky. But then one of my school applications came through, so I went to Fort Benjamin Harrison and took stenography and became a court reporter.
And where is Fort Benjamin Harrison?
That's in Indianapolis.
What was your Army experience like? Was it positive? How do you?
Oh yeah, yeah. I just think everybody ought to do it. I believe in universal military training for boys and girls. I think it gives you a chance to mature and also do a little payback, to your country, and I'm for it.
Now, when you say universal military service, but
well,
in today's
civilian
world,
service is just same thing.
Like your granddaughter's doing.
Exactly. My granddaughter's doing Teach for America.
Well, when did you finish your service?
By the way, she's also been accepted to Harvard Law School.
You're a little bit proud of that, aren't you?
I certainly am.
When did you finish your Army service?
56. And I came home and just hung out a shingle. I interviewed with what is now Bolt Cummins, but then it was Hume, Howard, Davis, and Bolt, and then I interviewed with Spearsmore, Rebb, and Williams in Chattanooga, and each one of them were paying young lawyers $250 a month at that time, and I figured I could do better than that in Tullahoma. Tullahoma was undergoing a lot of growth, a lot of deeds and wills and ambulance calls, but I did a lot of real estate work.
Now you said
you
said you interviewed with the Spears firm in Chattanooga. The other firm you mentioned, the Bolt firm, was in
Bolt Cummins in Nashville. Is Bolt Cummins now. It was Hume, Howard, Davis, and Bolt at that time.
And when you say you hung a shingle, you just literally did that in Tullahoma?
Oh yeah.
And where was your office?
Traders National Bank building. My assets over millions. I was on the 2nd floor. Over the vault. No, $25 a month was my rent, and I had a secretary who was just a housewife, wanted to get out of home for a little while. I had her for 3 hours a day, $1 an hour.
Now, so when you started out practicing law in Tullahoma, how many lawyers were there in Tullahoma?
Well, in Coffee County, we had a Coffee County Bar Association, and I'd say there were about 15 of us in the whole county.
And who were the circuit and chancery judges when you first started practicing in Coffee County?
Judge Bob Keel was one of the chancellors. Judge Brady, Judge Pete Brady was a circuit judge. Fred Gillum was the Attorney General. Jerry Ewell, he was Assistant Attorney General.
And Gerald Ewell later went on to be a circuit court judge in Coffee County.
He did.
Now tell us about how long did you have a shingle and practice by yourself before you made a change?
Well, I made an arrangement with Walter Miller, Pete Haynes in Winchester, who allowed me to put his name on my letterhead of counsel. and he was a great older lawyer, and he never opened a book. I'd write the briefs, and he'd try the cases.
Tell us about Mr. Pete. How is it that you formed a relationship with him, and just tell everyone about him.
Well, he was a great fellow. He had been in the legislature for 40, 50 years, and he was Speaker of the House 3 times. He was Speaker of the Senate twice. He, along with a couple of other fellows, was called the Unholy Trinity.
Who are the other 2 of that Trinity?
I knew he was going to ask me.
Cummings?
That. Yeah, Jim Cummings from Woodbury. And
I can't remember who the third one is.
It'll come to me in a minute. Go ahead.
Well, why were they called the Unholy Trinity?
Because they ran government in Tennessee. Everything had to go by them. Put it that way. You know.
Well, now, how far away is Winchester from Tullahoma?
It's about 14 miles.
And how is it that you met Mr. Haynes and formed that relationship with him?
Well, I guess it was maybe through my brother-in-law Jack Walker. I met Pete Haynes. Anyhow, he was happy to work out the arrangement, and it worked fine. I drove back and forth a lot. Finally, I talked him into forming a partnership and getting a fellow. We were representing State Farm and a bunch of other insurance companies, but the adjuster for State Farm was a guy named Tom Hull, and I was crazy about Tom and working with him, and I talked him into quitting State Farm and joining me, and then we talked Pete into forming Haynes, Wiseman, and Hull. And then Joe Hickerson came with us. So it was Haynes, Wiseman, Hull, and Hickerson, and we had offices in both towns, Tullahoma and Winchester. And we tried cases all over southern Middle Tennessee.
Tell us about the kinds of clients that you had back in those days with the firm names you just mentioned. What kind of work did y'all do?
Well, I guess we did a lot of insurance defense. You know, there was a lot of personal injury work that we were very much involved in. We had State Farm. We had several other insurance companies that were just dependent on us regularly for all over southern Middle Tennessee. Tried a lot of cases in and out of court every day, just about. And we also represented Arnold Engineering Development Center managing contractor, Aero Incorporated was the managing contractor. And they had a bargaining unit of 1,800 employees that we did the labor law work for them, and we did some corporate work for them.
What is Aero, and where is it located, and tell us what that is?
Well, it was the managing contractor at that time of the Arnold Engineering Development Center, which took over the land that had been Camp Forest, and the Air Force. It's the Air Force principal test center. They've tested everything, both in model form and in full size form in a lot of instances. That's gone up at the Cape. You know, they have the ability to photograph a bullet in flight and simulate Mach 10.
They use wind tunnels. Right?
Yes.
One of the claims to fame, Tullahoma was the largest wind tunnel in the world.
Yeah. Well, they accused some people of being that.
Who were some of the lawyers that you would try cases against back in those days?
Well, Jim Henry and John McCord, if they got one side, I got the other side, and vice versa. Dick Harrison, I tried a couple of cases against Joe Henry.
From Pulaski?
Yeah. It was Jim Henry's brother, who later Supreme Court Chief Justice. Lawyers, Joe Bean in Winchester was a big-time plaintiff's lawyer. So he was on the other side a lot of times.
What about in Bedford County or in Lawrenceburg?
Yeah.
Like that?
Well, I tried civil cases in Bedford County. Finally wound up with a criminal case, which you're familiar, I think.
We're going to talk about that. Tell us about the criminal work, and I want you to tell us about the case in Bedford County, how it was that you became involved in that, and tell us about that trial.
Well, I got a call from Bill Russell one day.
What year is this?
About 19, wait a minute.
64, 65?
No, it was after that. It was I came to Nashville to become state treasurer in January 1971. This was in late 69, early 70.
Okay. So Bill Russell.
Bill Russell was a friend of mine, and he was the judge. He was the district judge, circuit judge in Shelbyville and around that group of counties over there. He said, "Tommy, you got quite a few cases in my court." And I said, "Well, Bill, I've been very fortunate. I'm glad to be able to try something with you." He said, "Well, you're about to get a criminal case." I said, "Oh." He said, "Yeah, I've got a criminal matter over here, and I can't get anybody locally to take it. I'm going to appoint you."
Tell us the facts of that case.
Well, Edward Joseph Magee was an 18-year-old kid who'd been in and out of Central State Mental Hospital 2 or 3 times before this happened. But he
was accused of.
He was accused of. He was convicted of one in one instance, but he was accused of killing 2 8-year-old girls in the city dump who were out there looking for dolls at Christmas time. Can you imagine a more sympathetic situation?
And Judge Russell knew that there wasn't a lawyer in Bedford County who wanted to take that case.
Who would take it? He tried to get them several, but
it was very controversial.
Oh yeah, and it was of course pro bono.
And what was your experience in criminal defense work at that time?
I had, in a small town like that, Tom, I took anything walked in the door. Just a very, very broad spectrum of litigation and office work.
Was this case involving Mr. Magee, they were asking for the death penalty?
Yeah.
And it went to trial?
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about, did you have to have some sort of, did they assign somebody to protect you while you were going to and from Bedford County?
The courthouse was full every day that we tried. It took about 2 weeks to try it, but Bill made everybody stay in their seats until the highway patrol ushered me out and took me to lunch and back. It was very controversial.
And the state was seeking the death penalty. What was the result of the trial?
Well, we managed to get him life rather than the death penalty. That was really the issue. I had tried pre-trial and again, of course, during the trial to suppress the confession. They'd gotten a confession from him. After a very lengthy interrogation, they finally said, "Eddie, if you'll just tell us everything that happens, Jesus will forgive you," and then they worked on his religion and got him to fess up, and he did. He's still out there.
What, I'm going to ask you about that in a second, but I'm interested in this, the confession. Was that a written confession that he signed?
Oh, yeah.
How did you know that they put that play on him? Was it recorded, or did he tell you that?
No, he told me, and then they were honest. They said, "Yeah, we did that."
He was accused of killing 2 little girls.
Two girls.
Was the case that you tried?
Raped one of them.
Okay. Was the case that you tried involving both deaths or just one?
Just one. They just tried one.
Who was the prosecutor in that trial?
Jim Kidd was the attorney general for that area, but they also hired special counsel. They had one other attorney general that came in and helped Jim, and then the state also hired a private lawyer to try the case. And
what was your theme? What was your approach in successfully convincing the jury not to give him the death penalty?
Well, I got a psychiatrist here in Nashville to come and testify for him and tell his mental health history. I got one of his teachers to come and tell the jury about him. They got the juvenile judge in Davidson County to come down. He'd had him on several occasions. Kid had a really tortured upbringing. He was illegitimate, and his mother left him as soon as he was born. And he was raised by his grandmother, and she made him wear a bag of asafoetida to school every day to ward off evil spirits.
What is asafoetida?
Well, the druggist will say, let me just give it to you because it's not worth spelling. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I probably knew more about it at the time, but anyhow, it stinks. And he had to wear this around his neck.
Every day at school?
Yeah. He had been in and out of the mental hospital three or four times.
It wasn't too long ago where he actually was released from prison.
Well, he was. They released him, and then somebody came up with the information that they'd never tried the other girl, and so they said they were so they started out to try him. They rearrested him
after he'd been released.
Yeah. Oh, he'd served. Well, let's see, since 1970, it's 40 years he'd served. But so then they settled that. He agreed to. Actually, he didn't want to come out in the first place. He had trustee status. He was acclimated to the penitentiary, and that happens. I've seen cases of that in the federal system. An inmate will decide that this is home.
How did you know that about him? Did he stay in touch with you, or how did you learn all that?
Well, I started getting calls about it as soon as he was released. I'm sitting here as a federal judge when all this is happening. And of course, I remember the case very well. We didn't have public defenders at that time. The judge just appointed you.
You didn't have much choice to say yes or no.
Oh, you had to say yes, yeah. But that was your professional obligation. But they had just, when I tried this case, the legislature had just provided for a maximum fee of $500 and something up to that for representation of indigent defendants. And I think I got the first $500 payment. And we went all the way to the Supreme Court with it, of course.
I want you to tell us about another criminal case you had, and it was for an individual in Tullahoma, I believe, and the family would tell us how they would pay you for the work that you did, and tell us about that case.
This young man killed his wife.
Tell us the circumstances.
Well, his wife was shacked up with somebody else, and he found out about it, and he went over with his shotgun and called her out, and followed her home, walking 20 paces behind her with a shotgun. And he got home and sat around the stove for 2 or 3 hours, and finally he just killed her.
Now, who hired you to represent him in that? His
grandfather, which he's a black man, but everybody called him Uncle Rufus.
He came to see you and asked you to take that case?
Mm-hmm. And I charged him what I thought he could pay, which was $300. And he paid me at the rate of $15 a month out of his Social Security.
He came every month and paid you that $15. Now, you got a good result in that case, as I recall.
Yeah. I was able to sell the jury in that case on the fact that he was
in the heat of passion?
in the heat of passion.
After waiting 2 or 3 hours.
After sitting there.
So,
Yeah.
so what was the conviction for? Was it manslaughter instead of
manslaughter?
Instead of murder?
Manslaughter. He did 1129.
I'd say that was worth $300 and $15 a month.
Yeah.
You also, during this period of time, while you're practicing law in Tullahoma, devoted considerable time to politics. When did you first become interested in public service?
I think from the very beginning. You know, your grandfather was a city alderman. He was the head of the civil defense during World War II.
So he was involved in local government.
Yeah, public service. You know.
Yeah. So, what was the first political office you sought?
Well, I did several things before I did that. I had managed Estes Kefauver's campaign in Coffee County in 1960, and John Kennedy's campaign for president in Coffee County in 1960.
These are all Democrats.
Oh yeah.
Barry made me ask that question.
Well,
she knows the answer too.
Yeah. Her father's an awful good Democrat.
I know that.
A fine lawyer. But the first time I ran for office was in 1964.
And
I ran for the legislature.
All right. And who was your opponent?
Charlie Hickerson. He was a one-term incumbent.
A Democrat also?
Yeah. Oh, there weren't any Republicans.
He probably wasn't very.
The Republicans met in the phone booth.
That's kind of changed now, though, hasn't
it? Sure has.
I bet Mr. Hickerson wasn't too happy you decided to take him on, was he?
Well, you know, we were friends. He was a good lawyer, and his first cousin was my law partner, Joe Hickerson. But no, we fought hard, and then he got killed before the next election in a car wreck. He'd come down to Nashville to take a deposition and got killed on the return home.
So you ran in '64 and won.
Yeah, ran again in '66
and
won.
Did you have opposition in '66?
Yeah, I was supporting John Hooker and
Hooker Jr.
Yeah,
in his race for governor.
Right, and the Ellington people decided to get me some opposition to keep me busy.
Back then,
and they did. They got, but they messed up. They got 2. I did anyhow get more than 50%. But Pop Jennings was one, and Pop had been commissioner of employment security or something under the previous Ellington term. He was a good guy. Pop had, Davis Wooten was a character lawyer there in Tullahoma, and he ran for the Senate. And Pop Jennings was a young teacher and later oil business. But Davis Wooten says, don't send that young fellow down to the legislature and let him get spoiled. Says, I've already been there, and I'm already spoiled. Says, you send me back. Davis, he put that in his ads in the paper.
Now, I'm going to talk about another ad you had later on in your political career, but you had an ad yourself, a musical ad back then, didn't you? When you ran for the House?
Yeah.
Tell us what the refrain was of that.
Oh, Francis Ann Brandon sang it for me. I wrote it, I think.
And it started off with "Be a wise man, vote Wiseman," right?
Yeah.
That was the refrain.
Yeah.
Used to play on the local AM radio station.
Oh, yeah,
down there.
yeah. WJIG.
That's right. Now, how many years did you spend, how many terms in the legislature?
I was there 2 terms. I ran for the Senate after 2 terms in the legislature. I ran for the Senate and lost.
And that was against?
Ernest Crouch.
But while you were in the legislature, tell us about what it was like to be in the legislature and some of the people who were there at the same time.
It was the most fun of anything I've ever done.
The legislature was?
Yeah.
Tell us
Loved
about
it.
that. Tell us why.
Well, you felt like you were doing something and doing something important, and a lot of good people, and we weren't paid anything. So the people that you were with were motivated, well motivated, and I think the first term I was here, we got paid $10 a day and $5 a day expenses. I had a room in the old hotel for $4. Can you believe that? $4.
Now, you were continuing to practice law and serve in the
Yeah, oh
legislature.
yeah. We'd meet on Monday night and meet early on Thursday morning. So I'd drive home Thursday afternoon. I could practice law Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and Monday, and drive down Monday afternoon.
Did you have any leadership positions while you were in the legislature?
I was chairman of the Democratic Caucus.
And some of the other folks in the legislature at the time that people who are listening to this might have heard of include who? Ned Carter?
Yeah, John Wilder.
C. Allen High.
Allen High. Johnny Steinhauer. I just saw him the other night. He's 85. We had a Bill.
John Bragg.
John Bragg.
We
There were a good bunch of people. Ed Blank.
Well, you ended up deciding to run for governor in '74, but my assumption is that you were planning for that for a number of years.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, sure.
Why did you decide to run for the Senate rather than just keep your House seat?
It was a bigger area and opportunity for more exposure, and this experience to claim.
Now, Ernest Crouch had been a senator for a while, hadn't
Yeah,
you? You were
yeah.
taking on
Oh yeah.
powerful incumbent.
And I had a little problem. I had supported liquor by the drink, if you referendum for liquor by the drink, and
While you were in the legislature?
right, and city option rather than county option elections for residents. And so Ernest got every Baptist church in the district to put something in their bulletin about me being for liquor.
So let's explain that in more detail. The city option versus county option for liquor by the drink meant what in terms of power and decision making, and what liquor by the drink means?
Liquor by the drink allowed restaurants to sell wine and booze if they had a sufficient number of seats for service of food. And you could only institute that in a city if you had a referendum.
Countywide at that time.
No, that was citywide for the liquor by the drink. But
Okay.
but to have liquor stores, it required a county referendum. And back in those days, most of the country people felt like they had to vote against it, and the city people wanted to vote for it, or a lot of them did. So the change to city option instead of county option was allowed for a lot more licenses to be issued.
How badly did you get beat by Ernest Crouch?
Oh, I don't remember the numbers, but it wasn't close.
So you have political ambitions. You lose the race for state senate in 1968.
Right.
Went back to practicing law.
Oh yeah.
But then decided to.
Never stopped practicing law.
Right. Good point. What was the next step in your political career?
I ran for state treasurer.
Now, running for state treasurer means what? Who votes for state treasurer?
The legislature. The legislature elects the three constitutional officers: the controller, the secretary of state, and the treasurer. And at that time, there were 75 Democrats in a joint caucus of the Senate and House, and that 75 was a majority. So the Democrat caucus was where you had to win it.
And when did you first start working and trying to gather the votes within the Democratic caucus?
Well, I made up my mind on November the 3rd, 1970. That's the day that I turned 40. And John Hooker got beat for governor, and Albert Gore got beat for the United States Senate.
By Bill Bragg.
Yep. And we also lost a House seat, I think, at that same time. But anyhow,
when you say we, you mean the Democratic Party?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry.
No. I'm supposed to ask you these questions.
All right,
sure
good.
We have it in context.
Good. Well.
So you decided then because of
well,
that.
I was in John's hotel suite.
John Hooker Jr.
Yeah, right across the street over here at the Sheraton at that time, and we were lamenting what was happening. And I told him, I said, I think we can hold the party together, even though we've lost the Senate and lost the governorship. We can hold the party together through the constitutional offices. And I'm going to run for state treasurer.
That was a big sea change in Tennessee politics for a governor to be elected from the Republican Party.
First time in 50 years.
First time since Reconstruction, wasn't it?
No.
50? No, who was?
No, 50 years.
Okay.
We had a Republican governor in 1920.
Mm. And that was Winfield Dunn in
Right.
1970.
Right.
So you decided on November 3rd, 1970, to take a shot at the state treasurer position.
Right.
And the election was scheduled for when? January of 70?
Take the official election with the whole legislature was 1st of January.
When was the caucus
But
vote?
the caucus was in December.
So you had a few weeks to
Yeah.
Now you had an opponent for that.
I did.
And what was his name?
Had two starting out, Jake Butcher and Charlie Worley. Charlie Worley was the incumbent.
Now we'll talk more about what happened.
We were all Democrats.
We'll talk more about what happened to Jake Butcher in a little bit. But so there were three of you. How did you go about trying to gather votes? And tell us about.
It's like waking up every morning and asking your wife, "Do you still love me?" Because you had 75 people that you were trying to convince to vote for you, and you talked to every one of them more than once.
Yeah.
Like I say. And you had a running total.
Now, Jake Butcher came to see you in Tullahoma when all this effort to get votes by the three of you was going on, right?
Yeah, he had his own private airplane. He flew down there. I took him out to the Tullahoma Country Club for lunch, and he told me that he had 54 signatures that had promised to vote for him.
Had them signed?
Yeah.
Signed commitments?
Yeah. I said, Jake, I don't know how you've done that, because I think I've got 40. And there were only 75 available.
What did he say to that?
Well, he just kind of laughed.
He wanted you to step aside.
Yeah, I didn't.
No, and so it comes up to the morning of the caucus to vote, and you got a phone call in the morning, I think. Tell us about that.
I did. Emily and I were staying over across the river at Cowboy Town's Motel. And
you were springing for the big bucks then, weren't you, for the hotel?
Oh, well, that was a popular place to stay. It's still there. It's a nice place.
I'm teasing. Go ahead.
No,
tell the story.
anyhow, but it wasn't the big bucks. You're right about that. Anyhow, I got a call at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was Mr. Bill Baird. He was a senator from Lebanon, a fine lawyer, older man. And, he said, "Tommy, what are you doing?" I said, "Mr. Bill, I'm in bed." He said, "I want you to go up on the hill and talk to Buford Davidson."
Who was then governor?
Right now. Yeah, he was then governor. This was 6 o'clock in the morning. Buford got there at that time in the morning. I had never been close to him. I'd always been in the opposite political party, or political faction of the Democrat Party.
And he just had a few more weeks to go, and
he didn't have much
through.
longer to go. But I went in his office, and there wasn't anybody there. He didn't have a secretary or anything else. He was just the two of us sitting in his office. He said, "Tommy, how many votes you got?" And I told him how many I thought I had. He said, "How many's Jake got?" And I told him how many I thought Jake had. He said, "How many's Charlie got?" Now, this is Charlie Worley. This is the incumbent who he had appointed. Governor Edmond had appointed him to be treasurer 2 years before. And so I told him, I said, "Charlie's got 9. He said, "How many of those can you get if Charlie gets out?" And I said, "Well, I think I've got seconds on 7 of them." He said, "Can I get the other 2 for you?" I said, "You can get 1. The other one's not going to vote for me under any circumstances." But he said, "All right." I said, Charlie's going to withdraw." He said, "I don't want Jake to be treasurer."
Now, Jake Butcher later went on to continue in a political career, and then later was indicted and sent to prison, right?
Yeah.
But before that time, he's still in this treasurer's race. What happened when the caucus met?
Well, once again, he thought he had 54 signed up, so I had a few friends in the legislature who were positions of power. John Wilder was wielding the gavel, and my friend John Bragg from Murfreesboro got up and moved for a secret ballot. And John Wilder gavelled it through on a voice vote.
What does that mean, to gavel it through?
Well, I mean, he didn't. We didn't have any debate on it. He just all in favor.
And then he gavelled it down.
And
so it went to a secret.
Went to a secret ballot, and
what was the result?
Won by 1 vote, 38 to 37.
And that was a 2-year term to be state treasurer, right?
Right. I was reelected, but I resigned then in March after a year and a third of the second term. I resigned to run for governor.
Real briefly, just tell us what your responsibilities were as state treasurer.
You took care of the idle funds of the state, and you invested them, and you ran the pension programs of the state. I instituted a number of changes in operation of the office that I'm proud of, actually.
That was a full-time job.
Oh, yeah.
And what did that job pay?
$25,000.
For each of the 4 years you did it?
Yeah.
Let's take a break.
Okay.
When you were elected state treasurer by the Democratic caucus, at the time you were a practicing lawyer in Tullahoma.
Yes.
And what was the name of the firm at that time?
We still kept Mr. Pete's name. He had died, but it was Haynes, Wiseman, Hull, and Hickerson.
Did you maintain an office in Winchester after Mr. Haynes?
Uh-huh.
When you left to become treasurer, you moved from Tullahoma to Nashville with your family.
Yes.
Now, tell us about your wife. What's her name?
Emily.
Mother.
Emily.
Give us her full name.
Emily Barbara Matlack Wiseman.
And how did you meet Mom?
Well, that's kind of a good story. I told you earlier that I was wandering around Tullahoma waiting to be drafted. And I ran into a lady, Ms. Neff. My father had sold a business to her husband, and they were originally from Louisville. And so I saw Miss Neff on the street, and she said, "Oh, Tommy," said, "I'm glad to see you." He said, "I've got these friends from Louisville who have moved to town, and they've got a daughter. I'd like for you to date her." And I said, "Well, that's fine, Miss Neff. How old is she?" She said, "Well, she just graduated from high school." Of course, now I've finished law school, and I'm waiting to go in there. I said, "Well, she's a little bit young, Miss Neff, I guess." So 2 years later, we married. After I was in the Army and came back, the same girl, she was 20 then instead of, or 21 then instead of 19.
Now you said Miss Neff called you Tommy.
Everybody does who knows me.
And that was your name growing up, and all the way up until the time. When did it become Tom?
Well,
is it true? Is it true it's to get it on a bumper sticker?
No, it wasn't. That wasn't the reason for it. I don't know. I just guess it sounded more formal or less. You know, when I was in Tullahoma, they called me Little Tommy because my daddy was called Tommy too.
So people who've known you for a long time, if they hear them call you Tommy, they know that they've known you.
I know that they've known me for a while. Yeah.
Now you and Mom had 3 children.
Right.
Besides your son, tell us about your other 2 children, their names and.
Well, let me tell you some more about my wife.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Let's tell you a little more about Emily. Emily graduated from Middle Tennessee State, and she taught school and supported us while I was getting my law practice started. And then, of course, she then quit teaching school after I did start making some money, and she was raising the children. She went back to work, and she had an interesting career. She was, at one time, she was the public relations director for Planned Parenthood
in the 1970s.
Right, in tough times.
Yes.
I mean, when everybody was trying to do them in. And then she worked for Jim Sasser's campaign when he ran for the Senate, and she traveled with Mary Sasser as her traveling companion when she was campaigning for Jim. And then after Jim was elected, she became his staff director or something for Middle Tennessee or something like that.
She ran his office in Nashville.
In Nashville, right. And then when Jim appointed me,
we're going to get to all that, but let's.
Well, all right. Then she then.
Lamar Alexander.
Right, Lamar Alexander called her, and he's a Republican now. But he asked her to
start a
new thing he wanted to do called Tennis Senior Program. And so she put it together, sending everybody who turned 65 a little letter of congratulations and telling them they could buy at a discount. And she had to go around and solicit merchants to participate in the discount program.
She developed that program for Lamar Alexander.
And she was working in that program when the director of the Tennessee Commission on Aging got into some difficulties and was fired, and so she took over the Tennessee Commission on Aging and did that for 18 years. She was the director of the Tennessee Commission on Aging for 18 years.
And during that time, she also went back to school and got her master's.
She did.
And was a big ally and a hard worker when you ran for governor.
Oh, yes.
And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Let's go back to the state treasurer days and tell us about the things that you did as state treasurer to make some changes in the way Tennessee was running its operations.
Well, as I said before, it was the job of the state treasurer to administer the retirement programs. Of course, the teacher retirement was a big one, and the state employee was a big one. But we also had a bunch of smaller ones, like for clerks, court clerks had their own retirement program, and the attorneys general had their own retirement program. It was 8 or 10 smaller retirement programs. So I pushed it through the legislature, had to go through the legislature, but we established the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement Program, which put them all together with one investment program. Then talking about investments, it was also the job of the state treasurer to administer the funds of the state as they came in and as they went out. And so I was interested in trying to use and beneficially use the idle funds of the state.
To earn money.
Yeah,
So what did you do?
We were doing some long-term CDs, one-year CDs. That was being done when I came in. But we had money that we had to keep for payment of bills, but it'd be idle for a period of time.
Without earning any money?
Without earning anything.
So what did you do to try to change that?
Well, I first asked the local banks if they could start an investment program for us for idle funds. And they said, no, we can't do that, So I went to New York, and I talked to Solomon Brothers and some people up there.
They were happy to take the money.
They were happy to take the money, and you could handle it by wire transfer. All I had to do was pick up the telephone and say, I want to send you X number of dollars, And
so did you send Tennessee money up to New York?
Well, you did it by wire transfer, but they also had to collateralize it. And we developed a program for that as well. But as soon as we did that for a weekend and earned a considerable amount of money for the deposit we'd made for the weekend, I called a press conference, and as soon as the press conference was over, I started getting calls from the banks in town. They said, oh, yes, we'll find a way to do that. You can do that locally. You don't have to go to New York. And we did. And as I say, that's one of the things I'm proud of. We earned $66 million in the 3.5 years I was state treasurer on idle funds.
That would not have been earned if that change hadn't been made. Now, you're state treasurer from 1971 until you resigned to start your race for governor.
Right.
During that time, you were making about $25,000 a year.
Right.
You took a pay cut to be state treasurer.
At least 50%.
And the family moved from Tullahoma to Nashville.
Right.
And did Mom work during that time?
No, she was helping me in my political ambitions.
Because while you're state treasurer, you're starting to build for your race for governor.
Oh yeah, I spoke at every watermelon cutting that would that would let me on the stand.
And Mom also was a formidable campaigner.
Yes,
herself,
sir. Yes, sir. She got to where she was a good public speaker.
Tell us how you went about trying to build a campaign when Tennessee has got 3 distinct regions, East, Middle, and West, very different culturally, 95 counties to deal with. How do you go about building a campaign like that?
Well, you would do it differently from the way I did it.
Well, because of the results?
Because of the results, and because I did not effectively shoot where the ducks were flying. My scheduler was inexperienced, and he was easy to convince. Whether we just got to have him in a rural Fentress County or something, or wherever,
But by the time your campaign started, you had a county chairman in every one of the 95 counties.
Yes.
And how many Democrats ran for the nomination for governor in 1974?
12.
Including you?
Yeah.
And you finished what in that primary?
Third.
And who were the 2 individuals who finished first and second?
Ray Blanton and Jake Butcher.
Now, there's a line that came out of that race that you attribute to me, but that means you were what in that race? The highest finish in what?
Non-felon. That's your line. Dad, you ran the best of the non-felons.
Tell us about that race. I would like for you to tell.
Well, they spent a lot of money.
And there was another person who spent a lot of money named Franklin
Haney. Right. And we raised and spent about $600,000 in 1970, which was a lot of money in 1970.
How much did Butcher and Haney spend?
I said 1974. They were up in the millions, and both of them had places they could get the money without having to ask somebody for it.
Things have changed since 1974. The way money worked in politics.
Yeah, Franklin had a construction company, and he could run ads for his construction company, but it was really And Butcher did the same thing. He'd run ads for his banks, but it was really a political ad. You know?
And this was post-Watergate, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Now, tell us who was running in the Republican primary.
Well, they had a bunch of people there too. Lamar Alexander.
That was his first statewide race, wasn't it? Lamar's, or had he run in? Because Winfield.
Yeah, that was his first.
Yeah.
That was his first. Yeah.
Dorch Oldham.
Dorch Oldham.
Nat Winston.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
It's okay not to remember those, because those are the three that were really the main ones, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you ran in '74 with that many candidates, the one who had a lot of name recognition in his area was Ray Blanton, because he was a congressman.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say that, and I probably got this from you, he probably didn't gain a single vote from the time he announced to the time of the primary.
The first poll that we ran, he had 22% of the vote.
And there wasn't a runoff law.
And that's what he won with.
He won with 22%.
He won with 22%.
And went on to become governor.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He beat Lamar like a drum, but Lamar was the
Republican nominee.
Republican nominee.
And that was when Lamar broke out the plaid shirt and walked across the state of Tennessee?
No, I think he did that the following year.
He did that in '78? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you supported Ray Blanton because he came out to the House and you had your supporters out there, and you pulled for the party.
I did, yeah.
And you were a lifelong Democrat.
Yeah.
Why were you a lifelong Democrat? What drew you to the Democratic Party? Besides it being in your blood.
Well, I inherited it, for one thing. My mother and dad were Democrats. But the big difference between the Democrat Party and the Republican Party, to me, has always been the role and function of government. How much should government participate in the lives of its citizens? And as a Democrat, I think that government needs to do what people can't do for themselves. And the Republican philosophy is the less government you have, the better government it is. You know.
Still that way.
And still that way. You know, and that's the difference.
Now, you had a campaign slogan when you ran in 1974. What was that? Tom Wiseman, not for governor, but what?
As governor. And I think I took off on something that maybe Bobby Kennedy had said, but every person can make a difference, and everybody ought to try.
And that's what gave you the idea for as governor?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but anyhow, that
was an inspiration.
That was the basic campaign theme.
Now, in that race too, there was ads and musical ads. As I recall, Ray Blanton had Dottie West sing a song, and it was "We Need a Ray of Blanton Sunshine."
Exactly.
And you had 3 campaign songs that were sung by Tammy Wynette.
Yeah.
Tell us how that came about.
Billy Sherrill wrote "Stand By Your Man," and he was the A&R director of RCA Records, and a good songwriter, as well as having just a real nose for being able to smell a winner. You know, he could.
He knew she was a hit.
He could pick them, yeah. But anyhow, he
was
his
a supporter
wife,
of yours, right?
Well, came through his wife. His wife was a cousin of Beverly Shelton, who was your swim coach in Tullahoma.
I didn't know that.
And that's how I got to know Billy Sherrill, through Beverly Shelton. Beverly called her.
And how did it come to be that Tammy Wynette was persuaded to make?
Well, he asked her to do it, and she did, but we were awfully late getting it done. He had trouble finding her. At the time, she was involved with some other things, and so it came a little late to be of a whole lot of help, but it was nice. And I
Now,
stand by a wise man instead of stand by your man.
Stand by your man, because Tennessee sure needs him. Let's give Tom a helping hand. It was one of the lines.
Stand by a wise man.
Oh. I've got the CD here. I'm going to give it to Barry so she can have it. Now, did you know that one of your campaign buttons was in the Smithsonian when they were displaying political memorabilia some years ago? Yeah.
Did not know that.
Why did you want to be governor?
Well, of course, you've got to admit that it's an ego trip, for one thing. But I did think I could make a difference and would like to have tried. And having been in the legislature those 4 years, and I did some lobbying, and I was state treasurer. So I had a familiarity with state government, and there were some things about state government that I thought could be done better and differently. And I wanted to have a go at it.
It must have been really hard to lose that primary race.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you put so much into it.
It's never
right.
fun to lose.
But you put so much into it. You really don't have a plan B, because you gotta run as hard as you can, expecting to win, don't you?
Yeah, and you're right. There was no plan B. The day after the election, I woke up. I didn't have an office to go to. I didn't have a job. I'd spent a lot of our savings.
You had some mouths to feed too.
And I had some campaign debts that I had to work out.
You had 3 children. You had a house and a mortgage in Nashville.
Yeah.
Didn't have a job, and you had campaign debt. What was your campaign debt approximately?
The remaining debt was $60,000.
Which was a lot of money.
Yeah.
So what did you do?
Worked out a deal with Internal Revenue Service to pay the taxes that Jesse George had failed to pay.
That was your campaign manager.
Yeah.
We won't talk about that.
And then, just whacked at the rest of it. I made a settlement with National Life. They had done a bunch of stuff for us, and I traded them my campaign lists for some of the money I owed them. These are things I've never told you, I'm sure.
I remember cleaning out the headquarters.
Yeah.
Now, but you had the debt you had to worry with, but you also had to start doing something.
Had to find a way to make a living.
Yeah. What did you do? What did you think about doing, and what did you end up doing?
Well, Jim Beckner had worked for me in the treasurer's office right out of law school, and then he had worked in the campaign, and he was an associate in the office of John Chambers.
This is in Nashville. These are 2 Nashville lawyers.
Yeah. And Jim came to me and suggested that I talk to John. And I did, and we formed a firm, Chambers and Wiseman.
And where was y'all's offices located?
We were in the L&C. Well, we started in the L&C, and then we moved to the First American.
And what kind of work did Chambers and Wiseman do?
Well, one thing that kept me busy for a couple of years was representing the financial industry in Tennessee to change the Constitution of the state to eliminate the interest rate limitation of 10% in the Constitution. And that was a representation that I undertook. And again, that's something I'm proud of. It really needed to be done. And when we started out, it sure wasn't going to be easy, I don't think, because the papers were all against us. You know, to say that you want to increase interest rates, that is not a very popular popular thing to try to do.
And at the time, the Tennessee Constitution had a cap on what could be charged.
Well, it had in the Constitution itself there was a 10% limitation, and the Supreme Court of Tennessee had interpreted that to mean simple interest. And at that time, this was during Jimmy Carter's or just right at the end of his, and interest rates got up to in the 20s. So money was leaving Tennessee to command these higher rates, and we couldn't get any outside money to come in, and it was really a tough situation.
Big barrier on investments in the state of Tennessee. Right? Was that one of the consequences?
Yeah.
So what did you have to do? You were hired by the financial industry to try to change that.
Yes.
So tell us what you did to change that.
Well, the first thing we had to do, it's a complex procedure to change the constitution of the state. First thing we had to do was get the people to vote for a call to have a constitutional convention.
Meaning the citizens of the state of Tennessee?
Yeah, it had passed. We got it passed. We got it passed in the legislature to have a call, but that call had to be submitted to the electorate. And so we had a committee for a constitutional convention that I formed, and we ran ads. One other aspect of the Tennessee Constitution was that every county had to have a ranger to gather up stray cows. That was in the Constitution, and had been since 1870 or before. At least.
Every county.
Every county had to have a ranger. So McDonald, Carden, Cherry were my ad company in those days, and so we came up with the idea of a ranger sitting there with his feet up on the desk and his cowboy hat on, and kind of cocked back, and we just made fun of the fact that you had to have a ranger, and used this as a way to promote the calling of the convention to get rid of antiquated provisions.
So when you were calling for a convention that was not limited to just interest rates, did it mean everything was on the table, or was it limited to certain things?
That's a good legal question. We called them the Limited Constitutional Convention. But the truth of the matter is, if they'd done something outside those limits and it was approved by the people in subsequent submission, it would have changed it.
So the power was there to change anything, but y'all tried to manage what was changed.
Right. We called it a Limited Constitutional Convention.
Now, who is part of the convention? How did one become part of the convention?
All right. After we passed the call to the public.
Now, was that on a special election, or was that on a regular election day?
Gosh, Tom.
It's okay if you don't remember that.
No, it was on. I think it was a special election.
I think it may have been.
Yeah.
So
anyhow, after the call was passed, the next thing we had to do was
stack the
delegates,
votes, right?
elect delegates.
Yeah. How did that happen?
One from every House district. So there were 99 delegates, just as there are 99 House members, and of course we had to take an active part in those elections. Find out how they thought about this sort of thing, and we assisted those that were similarly inclined.
Right. So they
and
were.
Then we had the convention itself.
And that was that convention in Nashville.
Yeah.
Who presided over it?
J.D. Lee was the president of the convention.
J.D. Lee, lawyer from Knoxville.
Well, he's actually from Maynardsville, or
Barry's going to tell me. I don't remember where J.D.'s from. Madisonville.
Madisonville. I said Maynardsville. Yeah, I knew.
And his niece is on the Tennessee Supreme Court, Sharon Lee.
J.D. beat Dick Eskin.
Really?
Yeah.
Dick was running to be chair of the convention.
Right. Dick was a delegate from Davidson County.
Now, Dick Eskin is the husband of Jane Eskin, who ran for the United States Senate and other political offices.
Right. Yeah. And she was also on the Public Service Commission for a number of years.
Was Bill Leach involved in the Constitutional
That was a different convention. Bill Leach was president of the convention that changed the method of taxation of farm property.
Was that before or after your convention?
Before.
Okay.
It was a convention of, mine was a convention of we changed it in 1978. Bill's was 1972.
All right. Now, so that took up a lot of your time when you were with Chambers and Wiseman.
Yeah.
You also represented the liquor industry and did some things that changed laws about where liquor stores could be, if I recall correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, I was a lawyer for the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of Tennessee, and they had a lobbyist, Tom Hensley. I sort of supervised his efforts, but I also went to Supreme Court for him 3 times. And my opponent in all of that was Bill Koch, who's now on the Supreme Court. Bill was in the Attorney General's office, and we're great friends, you know.
I know.
Still,
yes,
and became so in our.
So he was assigned responsibility by the state Attorney General to oppose your efforts to do what?
Not really to oppose my efforts. He was just the person in the state Attorney General's office to represent the commission. It's called the Alcoholic Beverage Commission, ABC.
And what was the upshot of all that? What was the result of the 3 Supreme Court cases? What changed?
Well, one of them was over required markups. You know, it would call the industry, of course, had gotten the legislature to pass a law requiring you to mark up wine 40% and liquor 27.5% or something like that, and
guaranteeing them a profit margin.
Well, yeah, it was a price fixing.
Sanctioned by the state.
Sanctioned by the state, and they passed another law finally, repealing those earlier laws, and so I attacked that as unconstitutional, and won in the lower court. But Bill beat me in the Supreme Court. And then we also, I said, what else did we go up on?
Was there something about allowing liquor stores to be outside the old Nashville city limits?
I did that as a lawyer for an individual.
You challenged the
Paul
law.
Bud Slick was one, and Buddy Shacklet was another. They didn't have the political ends to get it through the Blanton administration. That's what Blanton finally went to the penitentiary over, was doling out the liquor licenses. But I represented these guys. Both of them wanted a liquor store, and both of them had they got everything except the thing you had to get from the mayor of Nashville. You had to get a certificate of good moral character.
The mayor, him or herself, but of course then it'd be a he always, would have to give a certificate of good character?
Yeah, and you had to have that, and they just didn't give it to anybody that wanted to get one outside the old city limits.
So how did you go about changing that?
Well, I said that was unconstitutional.
And you filed a lawsuit?
Yeah, I filed a lawsuit.
How far
started in the Chancery Court and went all the way to Supreme Court.
Who was the chancellor?
Allen High.
Allen High. And did he rule in your favor?
Yeah.
He was in the legislature.
Yeah, we were in the legislature together. Uh-huh.
And it went all the way to Supreme Court, and they agreed with your position.
Yeah.
And that allowed liquor stores to be outside the old city limits.
Right.
Now, were you involved in not just this policy making part of your legal practice between 74 and 78? What other types of legal work did you do?
Oh, I tried some cases down here before Judge Gray and Judge Morton.
So you did general civil work too?
General civil practice, yeah.
Now, you also kept your hand in politics, and I believe worked to help Jim Sasser become senator.
I did.
Tell us what your role was in his campaign.
Well, yeah, I had, of course, run for governor in '74 and had a lot of contacts as a result of that, and a residue of friendships and I was able to call a lot of those people and recommend Jim Sasser.
Did you have?
As a matter of fact, I introduced him the night he announced. I made the introduction speech and went around the states making some speeches for him.
Had you thought about running for that office yourself?
Not really. He thought I had, and he thought I was going to run against him. Yeah.
Now somebody did run against him.
Oh yeah.
Who? John J. Hooker.
John J.
Jr.?
Hooker, Jr. There was somebody else in that race too. I can't remember who it was.
And Jim had been the state party chairman. Is that
Yeah.
where he came from? And of course he was a lawyer.
But he was a lawyer before that, and Jim and I had been friends since I practiced law in Tullahoma. He was with the firm down here of
Good Pasture.
Good Pasture, Carpenter and Dale, and they associated me in some lawsuits that I tried with Jim.
Did you have a title or in his campaign?
No.
Okay. George Barrett was also somebody that worked.
Yes,
with
sir.
you.
Yeah, George worked hard for him.
Yeah. George is, of course, a lawyer in Nashville, Citizen
Yeah.
Barrett. Now, how is it that you start a law firm in 1974 with John Chambers, and that law firm grew? You had you added some lawyers. Did George Payne, did he work in your law firm? And did Keith London work in your law firm?
Also, yeah, they were both associates in our case.
And they've both gone on to be federal bankruptcy judges.
Right.
How is it that you get that law firm going, you build it up, you're doing well, and then all of a sudden it looks like there's a federal judgeship coming open? Tell us about that.
That had always been my ambition to top out my career, really, to be a federal judge. I saw Charlie Neese. I practiced before Charlie Neese and practiced before the judges of East Tennessee, the Eastern District, when I was down there in Winchester, which is part of the Eastern District. Tullahoma is also.
So you had actually thought about being on the federal bench even before you ran for governor?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So who's did a position?
I wanted to top out.
That would be the end of your
thinking about hogs. But I really wanted to end my career as a federal judge.
Why a federal judge instead of a state court judge?
The perks are great, for one thing.
Yeah. Pretty good retirement.
Good retirement. You just stay there the rest of your life,
Well, did a seat come open, or tell us how that got started?
Yeah, okay. Judge Frank Gray took senior status, and then he also became very ill and was unable to do anything as even as a senior judge. But the appointment for his replacement, Judge Frank Gray's replacement, was out there, and it was Jimmy Carter as president, and so we were going to get a Democrat. So I expressed an interest in it, and Jim Sasser set up a merit selection committee, which was the thing to do back in those days. Jimmy Carter was big time on merit selection committees for every opening in the judiciary. And Judge John Wade was retired from the deanship, but he was asked by Sasser to head up the merit selection committee.
Dean Wade from Vanderbilt?
Yeah.
Headed up the merit selection.
Yeah. Frank Grell was on it. Jim Neal was on it. Wilma Rudolph was on it. The
Olympic athlete, right?
Yeah, the president of Magee was on it. It's a good-sized committee.
And they
then anybody that wanted to be considered had to submit an application.
And they reported out 3 names of recommendations. Jim Sasser, and you were one of the 3. Who were the other 2? Was it Ed? Was it
Bill Russell and Ed?
Ed Davies.
Ed Davies.
Bill Russell, is it the same Bill Russell
Same Bill
who
Russell.
appointed you
Yeah.
to represent
Yeah.
the fella in Bedford County back in the 60s?
And he had retired as a state judge, and he wanted to get another retirement, I guess.
And just to bring it kind of full circle, his son is a circuit judge
Oh,
down
yeah.
in Bedford County.
Lee.
Yeah. Lee Russell.
Yeah. And
then,
Lee was in the Constitutional Convention also.
of course, Ed Davies,
His father was federal judge.
and his brother was Elmer Davies, father of one of my dearest friends in all the world,
That's
Lee
right.
Davies,
That's right.
who became a judge in Williamson County. for
That's
a while.
right. And my fraternity brother,
Elmer or Ed?
Ed.
So he was one of the three, your fraternity brother.
Yeah.
And Jim Sasser nominated you.
In January
Okay.
of '78, and I still hadn't been confirmed in August.
How old were you when you were nominated? 48.
47.
47. Now, between January and August, here you are sitting in limbo. You've been nominated to be a federal judge, but
So no new case is going to come to
right,
me.
you had 2 kids in college, and you had lots of bills to pay, and
And really, you know,
who's
my
going to hire a
law
lawyer
practice,
who can't stay with
my
the
law
case?
practice was really going to heck in a basket, you know, because
Well, you got to tell the Johnny Paycheck story.
all right, I one day, you know,
You were frustrated.
I hope he took it as a joke. But anyhow, I called the assistant attorney general, who was handling appointments, you know, and I said, we got a very popular song down here in Tennessee by Johnny Paycheck. Said, take this job and shove it. I said, I'm afraid I'm just about to have to tell you that because I can't get any new cases. I can't. Nobody's interested in me as a lawyer, and I've got to make a living.
Was it hard to even submit your name to try to be a federal judge when you're 47, fixing to turn 48? You've started a law practice in Nashville that's growing, it's successful, and you're going to take another cut in pay, aren't you, if you're going to become federal judge?
In 1977, we took home twice as much as the job paid at that time.
Why did you decide to go for it then at that point?
As I told you, I'd always wanted to do it. You know.
And I think you told me at the time when we sat down and had a family meeting about it that those positions don't come open very often, do they?
And I think the expression I used was the rabbit doesn't run around the stump but once, you know. You got to shoot while you see him.
Was there one other federal judge at the time in Nashville?
Yeah, Clore Morton was the only one, because Frank Gray Frank Gray died right after I was appointed, and Clore was by himself. But then we got another judge 2 years later in the omnibus bill of 1980.
And that's the seat that Judge John Nixon.
John Nixon got one of those, right?
Now, after you made that phone call and basically said, "Look, if something doesn't move here, I'm going to have to withdraw," what happened?
I got a phone call when the Sixth Circuit Judicial Conference was being held here in Nashville, and I got a phone call from Washington. This person said the Attorney General's going to be in Nashville for the Sixth Circuit Judicial Conference. He'd like to talk to you. Can you meet with him in his hotel room? So I said, yes, sir, I believe I can be there.
And that Attorney General was? Griffin Bell.
Judge Griffin Bell, yeah.
And you met him in the hotel room and y'all had a conversation?
He sat in the chair and I sat on the side of the bed and we talked for about an hour and a half. Finally, he said, I'm satisfied. And we shook hands and my appointment then just sailed through. And after that.
You took the bench then in what month and what
August
year?
of '78, not long after that. Yeah.
Okay. Let's take a break and we'll come back.
Okay.